Reading, writing, and arithmetic will never be the same and soon may not even be measures of academic achievement. Here to talk about it, I'm joined in studio by Rachael Tutwiler Fortune, president of the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. Good morning, Rachel. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you, Anne.
We're also joined on the phone by Isabelle Hau, executive director of Stanford University's Accelerator for Learning, and also the keynote speaker at JPEF's upcoming EDTalk on September 23rd. Isabelle, good morning.
Good morning, Anne, and good morning, Rachel.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to have you both here. Isabelle, you've said that concepts of human intelligence that we've honored for hundreds of years are becoming outdated. And, we've traditionally measured intelligence by certain metrics. I wonder if you can just kind of remind us what is changing right now, what we've traditionally used to measure something perhaps called IQ, and why we're moving away from that.
Yeah, when we think, when we all of us think about human intelligence, and certainly when I do, I think about this very traditional measure of human intelligence, which is IQ, which is largely a cognitive measure of human intelligence. But things are changing, as you point out, with artificial intelligence that is providing so much information at our fingerprint, and also changing a lot of even our machine-human relationships. So we need to evolve some of those concepts. We need to have children learn maybe different things and in different ways. AI is changing how we learn and how we teach, and even the nature of our jobs.
It's interesting, Isabelle, because, you work at Stanford. Just yesterday, Stanford University published a first of its kind study looking at the impacts of AI. And what they were looking at, the study is called Canaries in the Coal Mine, and it is looking at, impacts of AI, particularly on entry-level jobs, young people entering the workforce. And basically, showed with numbers and their analysis what a lot of people have been worrying about, which is huge impacts on people's employment, and particularly in some fields that AI is starting to dominate, things like computer coding, customer service. How do you see the future of AI in education and in the classroom? Do you see it as displacing these traditional notions? Do you see it as displacing traditional roles, for instance, of teachers?
Yeah, and by the way, there were two very interesting reports yesterday published by Stanford. The one that you are pointing out to, which was focused on the impact on entry-level jobs, and then there was another one that was the sister paper, if you like. And the sister paper had also something really interesting, where they were elevating what type of jobs will continue thriving and what kind of occupations will continue thriving in the future. And they had this concept called human agency scale, if you allow me for a little bit of an academic term, which means that those jobs which will be very human-centered will continue thriving. And in particular, and Rachel and I would love this conclusion, one of the rising type of occupation that was highlighted in that other report was skills like training and teaching others, which are rising in value in our society. So as AI transforms knowledge work, what remains uniquely human is maybe our capacity to connect and to guide, to exercise what I call relational intelligence.
And I know that relational intelligence is going to be one of the subjects that you're going to be talking about at this Ed Talk, Rachel. And you're going to be having an extended conversation with Isabelle about some of these same things. I want to talk about that and how that is maybe a new way to assess human intelligence. But I also want to just kind of get clear. Do you think that AI is going to supplant what we currently think of as the core forms of knowledge? I mentioned in the intro, reading, writing, arithmetic, these things that we use to measure intelligence and often, aptitude. Are those things going away?
So in our minds at Stanford, at the Graduate School of Education, we don't believe they are going away. because you need to have a body of knowledge to be able to understand and think critically about what you see, what you hear, what you learn. And so those foundational skills will remain. Our view is more that we will also need different types of skills that will continue rising, such as teamwork, such as communication, all these relational skills, as well as adaptability and creativity and problem solving, because our children will have for sure more and more job transitions. And we know this already. The number of occupations that any human has right now has already doubled over the past, I think it's 10 years or so. And so it is clear already that this future generation will have more and more different occupations. So the need for adaptability in education are rising, and adaptability is very close to creativity. So we need to have our children really, and education systems really lead us toward these concepts of relational skills, adaptability, creativity. And then the third area, which also is rising as a big new need, and it was already there in our schools, but it's taking a different form, is digital literacy, including AI literacy. So we need to have our children know how to ask the right questions, to evaluate the information that they get, and that's going to be more and more complicated, and use tools as responsibly as we can.
Yeah, Rachel, I want to kind of ask you that, and also in a different way, because you and I and everybody in our world today knows people professionally who are leaning on AI to do jobs that they once either had to do themselves or find someone to do for them. And I find it hard to imagine that the basic skills, whether it's things that we do on the job or things that we're learning in school, that we're going to retain the same requirement of knowing those things when AI is capable of doing them.
Yeah. No, I think Isabel explained it incredibly well, and I couldn't agree more. And it's why we're so excited to have her thought leadership in our community as a part of the upcoming Ed Talks. Um, Students are absolutely going to continue to need those strong academic foundational skills. As we think about the future and the types of things that they're going to think about and need to grapple with professionally and just even in their lives, they're going to need to be able to think critically. Like, as you mentioned, with these technologies being able to increase efficiencies and, help us, get perhaps that much more productive in our output and things of that nature. I think the challenge is not so much in making sure that we as humans don't need to think ourselves or have kind of that strong foundation for being able to understand and interpret and grapple with ideas, but it is that much more about how do we alongside and these technologies make sure that we are positioned to make decisions that are going to, move us forward in the best manner possible. And so the only way we get that is if we as human beings are equipped and able to utilize our own knowledge alongside these technologies, which are just making us that much more efficient along the way.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about AI in education. It is a conversation that is going to be carried on in a greater extent at JPEF's upcoming Ed Talk in September. If you'd like to join our conversation, or if you have questions about AI in the classroom, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. Rachel, I believe that there are optimistic ways of looking at AI, and there's kind of more cynical ways of looking at AI. And it is a hopeful way to look at it, to think that we're going to have all of this extra time to devote to thinking big thoughts or being creative, because all of these smaller tasks will be handled by AI. But I would imagine that there's a lot of people in your world, in the world of education, that see a less rosy future that has to do with just a general erosion of our ability to think because we're not doing these fundamental tasks. We're not learning the most basic skills because we won't be required to, the
Mhm.
building blocks of knowledge and understanding. So, are you able to project that optimistic view when you're having conversations with local educators?
Yeah. I'll say that, even just a few years ago, I too had a lot of fear and trepidation around these technologies. And I think that those who have those concerns, it's rightfully so. I think when we have these conversations about generative AI and the capabilities of these tools, and quite frankly, if we're not using them responsibly, some of the concerns and challenging things that can happen as a result of that, then um, there is a lot to be concerned about. And I think that's why it's just so important that we have this conversation in a way that really centers learning and education and really making sure that we're thinking about what skills we need to be developing in young people so that they are prepared in a world. We're not going to turn back the hands of time and perhaps reverse the course that we're on with these technologies existing. And so since they're here, the question becomes, how do we make sure we're really preparing young people for the future that they will inherit?
And are young people the focus more than teachers? I feel like,
Mm.
teachers are going to have to embrace these technologies to teach kids, but in a lot of ways, the younger generation is sort of moving the older generation forward because they're already using these technologies
Right.
and they're already more familiar with them in many cases than people who are their educators.
100%. So I would say that it is not so much that the students are the focus more than the educators. These are technologies that are disrupting the world for all of us. And we want to make sure that educators are being equipped and supported to understand, one, the ways in which the world of work is evolving and how this is going to impact the world that their students will, be responsible for leading us in the future. But also, we want to make sure that they're supported to really embrace and leverage these technologies effectively in their schools and in the classroom. And along those lines is really why we're grateful and proud of our partners at Duval County Public Schools for the manner in which they are already supporting educators through an AI institute to really begin to grapple deeply with these technologies and learn more about them. It is a both and kind of scenario, and we need to make sure that we're doing both of those things simultaneously. I could not agree more with the point you raised that young people are at the forefront of these innovations. And I've seen firsthand, we had a recent partnership convening the Urban Education Symposium with the My Village Project. And we're so proud to see the young people really teaching the adults how to leverage these technologies effectively and helping them do things that they were trying to do by utilizing the tools.
Isabel, you have said that replacing or in some ways, redefining intelligence and looking more at relational intelligence as opposed to IQ as a measurement, relational intelligence includes a lot of possible components, whether that's conflict resolution or empathy or creativity, all of those things can be a different kind of intelligence that we can acquire. But some would argue, and I might be among them, that there are certain new technologies that are impairing even those skills uh, much more than, 15 or 20 years ago. And social media is probably a big factor in that. It has created a world where people are less likely to have face to face, perhaps connections, and maybe have a more difficult time developing skills like empathy. I wonder what you say in terms of how those technological disruptions might be changing these alternate forms of human intelligence that you think are so important for the future.
Such a beautiful question, Anne, and clearly the area of huge research questions that you're touching on. So there is a set of researchers that have published now multiple reports that are quite concerning. They are all around this phenomenon called the crutch effect. Essentially, when we have a crutch, a physical crutch, our muscles get atrophied in some ways. Similarly, here with AI, if AI makes things too easy and reduces efforts from, in terms of learning, learners may become more passive and rely on it and then develop fewer skills. So there is a clear concern here that, for example, if students are using AI to write essays without thinking critically about what they write, it's clearly an example of, a crutch effect over time of maybe students learning less how to write. So what I would love for all of us to think, and there is a big question out there, there are also a set of research that shows that AI can act not as a crutch, but as a catalyst, and really studying more when can it be a catalyst for learning. And it does so when, and it's not only related to AI, it's more broadly when we are able as educators to spark deeper engagements from our youth, creativity, exploration. And so when we observe those phenomena in research, when students are using AI to brainstorm, to collaborate with others, and refine ideas, then it obviously leads to stronger outcomes. So, the tension is really right here in front of us, as Rachael was pointing out to, is do we want AI to become a crutch that weakens essentially human learning and well-being, or a catalyst that actually accelerates and augments human intelligence?
And to be clear, I apologize with your accent. Are you saying crutch effect? Could you spell that for me?
Yeah, like a crutch, like when you have a physical accident, CRUTCH.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that I was talking about the same thing. And so you're saying that we need to make sure that these things are catalyzing development as opposed to becoming something that we lean on so heavily that our skills atrophy.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I'm curious, one of the things, Isabelle, that's been talked about a lot is um, the need to discern things that are fake. And I know that you've spoken and written about, the human intelligence and that skill set being something that can help us discern between things that are fake, whether they're images or deep fakes or, whatever. And that humans can be instrumental in that. I'm curious if you think that AI also can be the method for discerning fakes. I mean, it seems to me of all the things that AI can do in terms of processing enormous amounts of information and pulling out things that matter, that it could be more helpful and perhaps even more helpful than humans in terms of helping us figure out what's real and what's not.
Yeah, so there are indeed many techniques that could be deployed in reducing misinformation, and some could be AI generated. So there is a big question out there on how do we do this better. Right now, there's limited ability through AI system to decipher what is, real or not. You really need to go and verify whether the information that you have been getting, whether it's a text-based or video-based, is accurate or not. There are techniques that could be deployed. They are not as publicly facing right now. So it's maybe a policy question for some of our policymakers on how to deploy those technologies. It's not a technology problem. It's more of a human will problem.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Rachael, this is a difficult time for educators generally. We're looking at a system that is already stressed by chronic absenteeism among students post-COVID. School safety is a real concern. Politics has gotten very heavy in the schools these days, particularly here in Florida. Funding. So there's so many things that educators and students are coping with right now, very much real and on the table right now. Adding AI to the mix, do you think that is going to just push some educators out of it entirely? Or do you think that they're going to be able to kind of catch this momentum and embrace it and incorporate it?
It's a really good question, and you're absolutely right. There is so very much going on in the world of education right now. To your question about whether kind of the need to embrace or sort of determine how best to leverage these technologies, whether that's something that's going to push sort of educators out of the profession, I think that comes down to, how much support we're willing to provide them along the journey. And it's really always been about that. When we're talking about, some of these challenges, chronic absenteeism, it's really a collective we, challenge. These are the things that we, as a community, as an education ecosystem, need to be together grappling with. I am definitely of the opinion and on the side of, we want to make sure that the education system and the educators who are a part of it are supported to do the things that are going to position our students for success, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And so it is both about, how do we make sure that we're mindful about the world of work that these students are going to be a part of. I've heard a statistic somewhere that 65% of jobs that these students will be in, they don't even exist yet. And it's because of things like these changes with the technologies. And so, the function of education is to prepare young people. And we want to make sure that educators are receiving the support they deserve to do that job effectively.
And to students, I mean, we just got an email from Ricardo, and he says, what would you say to a high school academic counselor in terms of advising their students as they seek out college and career paths?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear, Isabel's thoughts on this as well. But I think, as far as, the world of work and where it's headed, and really the opportunities that are here, and the ones that are coming, it's really important for young people to, number one, continue to lean into their interests. I know a lot of times, we kind of look at the data and it's kind of like, is this job even going to exist? People thrive when they're in opportunities that are a good fit for what they feel they are good at and what they're interested in. And so if I'm a young person and I'm heading into college, I need to first and foremost think about where my heart is and where my passion is.
Mhm.
And then I want to think about like what skills I can develop and what opportunities are going to be available to me in order to really sort of capitalize upon that unique wiring that I have. We'll be curious for any thoughts that Isabel would have in addition to those.
I'm going to ask you that, Isabel, but I'm going to pile on one more because we got a message from Amanda on Facebook. And she says, I'd just like to add that our millennial generation of teachers might be the most nimble to navigate this AI transition, since they are the first generation of digital natives. She says this is a great opportunity for them to lead us into the innovative uses of AI and digital technology in K through 12 and higher education. I just want to get your thoughts about that, Isabel.
I love that question from your audience, because actually I was going to touch on this. I find that the education sector is one of the most innovative with AI right now. The education sector is adopting this technology, is trying it, and our teachers are just doing an incredible job with it. When I hear Rachael speak about an AI institute that didn't exist literally 2 or 3 years ago, or frameworks, I was just checking some stats on. We now have in the US more than 50% of our states that have adopted AI frameworks. This is incredible pace in just 2 or 3 years, incredible pace of change and adoption and innovation from our education system, because our educators are, as you pointed out, they see what the future is looking like. They want to be at the cutting edge of what the future of jobs will look like. They want to support our youth to be really leading and driving in this new area.
Well, I would be remiss as a public media representative if I didn't point out, Isabelle, Hau, that you actually co-starred with Grover of Sesame Street in a recent production. But Isabelle Hau will be here in town September 23rd, speaking with my other guest, Rachael Tutwiler, Fortune. It is sponsored by the Jacksonville Public Education Fund, or JPEF, and you can find information about how to get tickets to that event at jpef.org. Thank you both so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. We really appreciate you having us.
Thank you for having us.